Perfect. There we go. So welcome and just some procedures for our webinars. This program, as you can tell, is going to be recorded and we do post it on Wild Virginia's YouTube page. And then we will also share the recording in the follow-up email afterwards. So please keep that in mind. This is being recorded. At any time during the webinar, if you have questions, you can just put them in the Q&A box. So we like to organize it in the Q&A box instead of the chat because it helps us really keep track of all the questions and make sure we're answering as many as possible. So feel free, again, at any time during the webinar to place your questions into the Q&A box. We will have a Q&A session at the end of our presentation today. And then, of course, those who register will receive a follow-up email with the recording and any links that we are providing in the presentation after tonight. So thank you so much for being here. I'm Dr. Jess Roberts. I'm the Director of Habitat Connectivity at Wild Virginia. And we also have Jackie here and Kylie, who are my coworkers at Wild Virginia. And they're going to be presenting and helping us out tonight at the webinar. Okay. So something, if you are new to Wild Virginia, we're a state-based conservation organization. We have a lot of different conservation areas that we focus on. So one of the biggest ones is habitat connectivity. That is the program that I run. So producing more protected lands and also wildlife crossings in the state of Virginia, but we have a huge water quality, Mountain Valley Pipeline, and Clean Water Advocates program with Jackie helps run. And then also all of these webinars. We love to provide any educational opportunities on advocacy or just environmental education in general. So if you are new here, please do check us out at that QR code or wildvirginia.org, and we'd love to have you as a member. So the agenda for today, Jackie and I will be presenting on different topics, the basics of the ESA, but also what's happening currently. Then again, the background and the basics of the Endangered Species Act, what's actually happening, what are they trying to revise, how to comment, what to say, and effective comment writing. And then of course, we'll have a Q&A section at the end. All right, so the first part is me. So what's happening right now? So we have a new federal administration as of January of this year. And there have been a lot of executive orders, EOs, and a lot of efforts for deregulation. So modifying, removing, weakening current laws that are in place. And what does this administration ultimately want? So basically, ultimately wants an increase in domestic natural resource production and extraction. So making us a little bit more independent in terms of what the country needs instead of getting imports from other countries. So this is logging, drilling, mining, and we have a lot of particularly environmental laws in place that this administration sees as a barrier or really slows down the process of natural resource extraction, particularly for drilling for oil, natural gas, these types of things. So they are going after a lot of our environmental laws, things like the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. So we're going to be going through the ESA, or the Endangered Species Act, incidental take permits, but they have been other attacks as well. And also something that's happening is that we're seeing kind of an erasure of a language a little bit there too, and an attack at organizations that are doing any kind of climate mitigation or climate resilience, climate change, clean energy. There's a lot of that going on, and climate is now becoming a dirty word. So a few of the most recent executive orders and the attempt to weaken laws are, some of them is weakening of some PFAS regulations. I'm not going to go into all of them, but an executive order to expand our timber production and cutting down more forests, and a lot of executive orders targeting climate laws, particularly state climate laws, and we were removed from the Paris Climate Agreement, things like this. But the one we're going to be really focusing on today is the Endangered Species Act reinterpretation. So we're going into a well-established law that has been protecting our habitats and our endangered species for decades. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Jackie.
Thanks, Jess. Next slide. So I'm Jackie Goodrum. I'm a conservation policy consultant with Bald Virginia, and I am also an attorney who has studied and worked with the Endangered Species Act. Next slide, please. So what is the Endangered Species Act? It's possible you have heard about it. It is considered one of our foundational environmental laws. It was passed in 1973 and signed by President Nixon, and it had bipartisan support at the time of its passage. And it was created in a response to growing concerns about both species extinction as well as habitat loss. And this is really important because the act has these dual purposes of both trying to protect species survival, but also protecting the habitats on which their survival depends. Next slide. So one of the ways it does this is through a listing process. And the Endangered Species Act creates a list of species that are either endangered or threatened, meaning that they're protected under federal law, and that then their habitats as well are also protected. So endangered species are any species in danger of extinction throughout all or a significant portion of their range, while threatened species are any species likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future. Now, also the Act defines critical habitat, which are the specific geographic areas containing features essential to the conservation of any endangered or threatened species. And it's important to note that if a species is not listed, it is not protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act. Now, many states also have their own mini ESAs where they have listed certain species as protected under state law, but the Federal Endangered Species Act only protects species that are listed under this particular federal law. What's also important about the listing process is that it mandates this designation of critical habitat for listed species, and this has significance when decisions are being made about permitting different projects. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. So a key feature of the Act is the take prohibition. And so what this means is that you cannot take a listed species, an endangered or threatened species, and the ESA defines take as to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, wound, kill, trap, capture, or collect, or to attempt to engage in any such conduct. And this is a very important definition. It's a key feature of the Act. And there are certain exceptions to this taking prohibition, and the ESA allows agencies to issue what are called incidental take permits. So these are not permits that are given for intentional direct takings, intentional direct killings of animals. These are more harm or harassment or killings that are occurring because of some other legal activity. So for example, if a company is logging in a forest, or if they're doing a major construction project like a pipeline, there might be accidental and incidental harm to listed species that occur because of that otherwise lawful action. And so these companies would have to go to the agencies that oversee the ESA, Fish and Wildlife, as well as NOAA for marine species, and they would have to get permission. They would have to get an incidental take permit to do any activities that would end up harassing, harming, wounding, killing, etc., any listed species. And what's critical to this determination is whether or not these activities are going to be impacting the species for survival. And part of this analysis involves looking at the habitat of the species. And take is a really broad definition. It applies to all persons, organizations, and agencies, but it's a really important definition for this act to actually do what it was intended to do, to both prevent species extinction and also conserve the habitats on which these endangered and threatened species live. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does harm mean? And this is what we're here tonight, the Trump administration is trying to redefine this term harm under the regulations for the Endangered Species Act. So this is a definition that was defined actually in the mid 90s, and this has been the definition for harm since that time. And this is the citation 50 CFR section 17.3, where you can find it if you want to look up and see what it is. But it means an act which actually kills or injures wildlife, but such an act may include significant habitat modification or degradation where it actually kills or injures wildlife by significantly impairing essential behavioral patterns, including breeding, feeding, or sheltering. What's really important is, as Jessica pointed out, this is what the Trump administration is trying to do with this rulemaking is reinterpret settled law. We know, and we have known since 1995, since the US Supreme Court heard a case on this definition of harm in Babbitt v. Sweet Home, that this is a reasonable definition for the agency to use when it's defining what harm means, and also including that definition of harm in its definition of take. So this really is an attempt to roll back 30 years of established law um, and do something that really weakens the Endangered Species Act and threatens the survivability of numerous species, both flora and fauna, throughout our country. And it's really important just to emphasize that harm has been interpreted to include habitat modification, and that any modification to habitat would be something that would require an incidental take permit. By redefining harm in the way that the Trump administration wants to, applicants would no longer need to seek getting these permits. They could just act without permission. Next slide, please. All right, so again, why does this definition of harm matters? Well, there's kind of three key reasons. And the first is that it extends these endangered species protections beyond the direct killing to include habitat protection. And again, this is something that the Supreme Court upheld in Babbitt v. Sweet Home. They thought it was definitely reasonable for the agency to include these indirect impacts, these indirect harms, such as habitat modification, to be part of the definition of harm and to be a reason for why you would have to seek an incidental take permit in order to do this action that was otherwise going to harm these listed species. It also allows for this protection of species from indirect threats. It doesn't harm, broadening harm so that it is including indirect as well as direct threats is just one way that the act has been able to achieve both of its purposes of protecting species from extinction and conserving their habitat so that they can actually survive. And finally, this definition, this broad definition of harm matters because it creates this legal mechanism to address habitat destruction. Without a definition like this that includes habitat modification or degradation, then the habitats of listed species could just be destroyed without any consequence, and there would be no recourse. Next slide. So one example I have that I've been able to work on with Wild Virginia is where this came into play a bit is the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And during the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which was a construction project of a 303-mile pipeline running from West Virginia down through into Southwest Virginia, we, along with partner conservation organizations, used the Endangered Species Act to slow and temporarily stop construction of the pipeline because there were listed species, specifically the candy darter and the Roanoke log perch, who were present in the mountain streams that were impacted by the pipeline. Now, in the analysis that the agencies did, whether in determining whether or not to issue incidental take permits, they did look at direct and indirect impacts, but they didn't do as thorough a job as they needed to do looking at some of the habitat impacts, specifically looking at the habitat modification impacts, specifically looking at the impact of sediment on these species' survival and how the increased sediment from construction of the pipeline was going to impact the clear mountain streams in which these species lived. And so the Fourth Circuit actually ended up revoking incidental take permits that were issued by the agency because of this failure to consider those harms to these listed species. But without a broad definition that included harm, meaning habitat modification or degradation, then this would not have been an issue and this would not have been a tool that we would have been able to use to protect these species and to slow this project. Next slide.
All right, and it's back to me. Thank you, Jackie. We're going to be going back and forth. Okay, so how to submit your comments. Since it's a little bit confusing, but we're going to make it super easy for you. So we're going to provide again all of these links and the instructions on how to submit your comment in the follow-up email. We can also put it in the chat at the end of tonight's webinar as well. So basically, you're going to go to the regulations.gov. This is the website that you will see when you first come up. And you're going to put in basically the code for this specific potential ruling. And so here it is. I am putting that code in there. You're going to hit search. The next page, you can click the proposed rule, but also it's like one of two documents that are going to come up. So you can just, again, search for rescinding the definition of harm under the Endangered Species Act, and you're going to press that button. You're going to say comment. And so the next page is going to come up. It'll give you a little section where you can put your comment in, but you can also upload PDFs. You can also say, are you an individual? Are you with an organization, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all helpful for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service when they are going through these comments. So again, we are going to provide all of these details in the chat and also in the follow-up email, so you'll have all the instructions you need. Okay, so what should go in your letter? And we do have a sample letter for you that I will share in just a second. But basically, you're going to start with your why. So making it personal or professional expertise is super, super helpful. I'm also coming at this. I used to be an intern for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I used to have to be the one that went through all these comments. So I have a little bit of intel on how this process works. And something really important to keep in mind is they're going to tally certain arguments. So arguments are going to come up frequently. And so they're going to tally how many people gave this argument, how many people mentioned this, how many professionals gave a comment, how many just concerned citizens gave comments. So they're going to tally all of this, and all of this information really helps them in their decision-making process. So it's really important to provide as much as possible. So again, you're going to start with your why. Why does this matter to you? Any sort of personal or professional tie to this issue really helps them, especially if you have a certain type of expertise. You're a biologist, you work in conservation, any what have you. Even in the private industry, that would help as well. So if you kind of deal with getting incidental take permits, you've done this process before, that really helps. And emphasizing, of course, the role of habitat and species survival. So as Jackie just described, sort of that harm and why it is so important to include the protection of habitat under the ESA to help them with their finding resources, breeding, etc. It's pretty essential to survival. And also the really key to that is that it gives us an argument to sort of fight back on certain development projects that could be really detrimental to our communities. Again, what Jackie said, that is something that is so huge. And then use local examples. So I highly recommend, if you're a Virginia resident, going and looking up federally listed species. So again, just like Jackie said, we have a state listed species versus our federally listed species, and sometimes they can be different. So look up your federally listed species. I will give you a link again at the end for where you find all federally listed species under the ESA and where you can really get into that database. But some examples are the bog turtle in Virginia and also the red cockaded woodpecker in Virginia. These are two federally listed species, and also kind of success stories of after being listed under the ESA and protected federally and having a habitat protection plan put in place. So both the bog turtle was really essential to protecting a bunch of wetlands in Virginia, so that's incredibly important. And then our lovely woodpecker here, after it was assigned to as a federally listed species, it actually had a lot of land be protected through lots of private landowner conservation benefit agreements. So that was really amazing and helped now that both of these species actually start to recover, which is great. So some success stories to include, but again, look up your own. If you have your own stories, that is so helpful. Um, So we can, and arguments that we can have development, we don't have to get rid of one of our key laws that protect endangered species. We can sort of work with these laws, right? We can come up with creative ways to do mitigation, to have conservation habitat plans put in place, and we can do smart planning instead. So things like nature-based infrastructure, like wildlife crossings that we do at Wild Virginia. So we don't have to get rid of our key environmental law in order to protect endangered species and have certain development projects. This doesn't always work out. That's not always the case, but we can be really creative. We don't, again, have to just get rid of our sweeping, beautiful laws that really do help our invasive species. Offer alternatives come to that as well. And then also really use examples that reflect your community or certain communities and economic impacts and benefits. So, what are the benefits to wildlife in your community? And what sort of economics benefits do they also bring to your community and to you in particular? And then clearly state your ask. So we're going to, again, I'll show you that in the letter, but clearly stating what we're asking. We do not want habitat protections to be removed from the description of harm. So I am going to show us our letter real fast and go over it. All right. Let me share my screen one more time. There we go. And again, you are going to get the link for this. So something just to keep in mind, please download or copy and paste the language to your own document so you can edit it on your own computer, because this is the template for everybody. All right. The comment section, where you copy and paste your argument, does have a 5,000 character limit. That's pretty large, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. But do keep in mind that is. And then you can also put PDFs. They have a section where you can upload a PDF. So if you have your own like letter PDF version, you can do that as well. So basically, everything that I kind of went over in terms of what makes a great letter, we include as examples that you can include yourself. Again, inserting your own personal or professional background, and then how this sort of impacts on you wanting them to not change this law. Then you can go into the importance of the Endangered Species Act, again, giving some maybe local examples, examples that you have worked on. I like to always include the scientific name. That's something that they did sort of tally at US Fish and Wildlife, was their scientific name. So they could keep track of the exact species that people were mentioning. And the scientific name really helps them get to the bottom of it, because sometimes with their common name, you can get it kind of confused sometimes, because some common names are wacky. And also some examples of Endangered Species Act success stories. I linked there for you, but feel free again to use your own. One of these success stories linked here is with the woodpecker I mentioned before, and how basically they benefited from being protected. And that's a Virginia native species. And then development and habitat protection can coexist. So we can give examples. This is a link to what a conservation benefit agreement is. This is working with our private landowners and how they can get into one of these agreements where they agree to do certain habitat protections and mitigation, but then they cannot have any other federal government or whatever agency come in and say that they have to do more. So they go into this agreement saying they'll do certain things and then no more. So it's a kind of a way to protect landowners as well as protecting endangered species. It's creative conservation. And then also any kind of examples of nature-based development solutions. And then, of course, we have a federal administration that really likes to see the economic benefits. likes to see job creation, etc., please do emphasize that. So again, any examples that you can bring in. Here's an example that I linked here for Virginia is outdoor recreation contributes to about 13 billion. And this is the number of jobs we recently got from our Virginia outdoors. So really beneficial to the state of Virginia in terms of our wildlife and our native habitats and how we need to protect them. And ESA is a major way we do this. So giving those community and economic benefits really, really helps. And then again, what is your specific ask? Make sure you have the ask actually listed in there because again, they do tally for how many people are for and against. And then I, at the bottom here, just gave a few resources. This is the link to where you can find federally listed species and what their status is, their conservation plans, all that kind of stuff. And any economic benefits of wildlife conservation, here are a few resources for you. Really great to list out some of their examples. So that is our sample letter. But feel free, again, download it, copy and paste, make it your own. We don't want to see the same language over and over again. It's good to give your own examples because it helps really make a great, robust language. And also, we're going to request through a FOIA to get these comments. And a lot of these comments are really good for journalists to use in their arguments, or we can use it in lawsuits, what have you. So these comments are very helpful generally to this effort. So, boop, boop, boop. Here we go. This is the QR code to the letter as well, but again, we're going to put that link in the chat and also in the follow-up email for you. So, again, I mentioned all these sort of details for the letter. It is due pretty soon, so we apologize. It is due May 19th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so our time zone in Virginia here. So again, please do get your comments and your letters in before then. This is hugely important and really does make a difference. As someone who, again, has been on the inside, I have seen it work out. All right, hand it back over to Jackie.
All right, thanks, Jess. So I'm going to give you a few writing tips on how to make your comment an effective public comment. And this is something that I teach often for Wild Virginia. I also actually teach a course at the University of Virginia on effective public comment. And so these are just tips and tricks that I have gleaned from years of working in this field and also reading and reviewing comments for litigation. So 3 words to remember when you're writing your comment is make it clear, make it concise, make it convincing. These are the 3 sort of descriptors that are going to be guiding you. This is what you're going to think about as you're writing your comment. Next slide. So what do we mean by clear? So first, think about what you're going to say before you begin writing. Jess has crafted this template letter that is going to be so helpful in guiding you what to say. And as you're thinking about how to say it, take time, don't just start writing, plan it out first, because then your writing will likely be clearer and more to the point. Gather any necessary information or facts before you start writing, including any references. This is particularly important if you are a scientific or professional expert in anything related to species conservation, habitat, Endangered Species Act, all of that. But also if you are someone who just personally loves a particular species, if you are a big fan of sea turtles or a particular type of bird and you just know a lot about them, you have spent years, personally studying them or just enjoying them, finding information that allows you to give relevant details, gathering that information ahead of time will also be helpful and help you to get to the point. Use an organized format, just broke things down into paragraphs. That is great. I also recommend using lists and numbering things or even using bullets if that helps you keep things organized, because an organized letter will be a clear letter. A letter that looks good is usually a letter that reads well. Next slide. So secondly, concise. Keep your letter concise. Keep your comment concise. Use only as many words as necessary, avoid run-on sentences, and avoid dense paragraphs of text. If you have a lot to say, then make sure you're breaking it up with some spacing. If you're including any graphs or charts or pictures or anything like that, you can also use those to try and break up your text, or you can attach them separately as appendices. But really, just only as many words as necessary. Don't repeat things. Next slide. And finally, convincing. Make your comment convincing. So you're going to want to assert your authority early. And this is something that just mentioned, like tell them who you are. Tell them why you're commenting. Tell them why that this particular rulemaking matters to you. People don't comment unless they care. Having read, and you can do this, you can go on regulations.gov right now and read comments that people have submitted about other rulemakings or other permits being issued, things like that. And you can read the comments, and what you'll notice is that people care a lot. Sometimes they use all caps to emphasize how much they care, and sometimes they do other things too. Um, but assert your authority early, tell them who you are, tell them why this matters to you, and also tell them why they should listen to you. Tell them if you are an expert, whether personally or professionally, that is the time to let them know. If you're someone who resides in a particular area that is known for having certain endangered or listed endangered or threatened species, that would also be something to tell them early on, because that is giving you the authority to comment because you are familiar with that particular species and it's the issues that it faces. Use relevant facts and examples, staying on topic. Don't veer off into subtopics or other things that the administration is doing to the environment that you don't like. You're sticking to this rulemaking. You're talking about the Endangered Species Act and their removal, this redefinition of harm that they're trying to do. Use because statements. So when you are making a claim, you're saying like, I oppose this rule, this proposed rule because, and then give your reasoning for do it. When you use because statements, it helps your writing become stronger. It makes it you sound more convincing because you're linking your claim with your supporting evidence for that claim using the word because. Show and don't tell. You've probably heard this before. This is all about using imagery, using word pictures to paint for your writer a picture in their mind of what you're trying to explain to them. So don't just tell them that, like you've seen development projects that have hurt a species you loved. Describe them, that project to them. Describe how the habitat was destroyed. Describe to them what it did to that particular species. Don't just tell them about it. Use your words to use your imagery. Be creative and show them what happened. Finally, and this is really, really important, avoid personal insults. Again, if you go on regulations.gov right now and you find some rulemaking comments to read that people have posted publicly on the internet, you will likely find some that are not just written in all caps, but also include curse words or unkind language or hateful speech. You want the person reading your comment at the agency to read it all the way through. You want them to want to side with you when they have finished reading your comment. You want to persuade them to like you. You want to persuade them to care about what you care about and how you care about it. So do not insult the agency. Do not insult the reader, the agency official who will be reading your comment. Avoid personal insults, personal attacks. Now, that is distinct from criticism and critique of how a government agency is handling certain things. If you are, it's totally fine to say that this rulemaking is failing to uphold their duties to protect endangered species. That's a totally legitimate criticism. That is not personally attacking anyone who works at the agency or anyone in the administration. So avoid personal insults is my final tip.
All right. So we kind of flew through that a little bit. But that's good. Yes. So really great tips and yeah, such a good point on criticism versus insults. Definitely good. The insults one, I have actually seen people at US Fish and Wildlife Service just completely throw out that comment if you're insulting them. So, or just kind of like put it in the insult category. And it doesn't like contribute to, the, what you're trying to get across. Okay, so this is Wild Virginia's contact information. Again, if you're new here, please do not hesitate to reach out. I will also put my email and Jackie's email in the follow-up email so you can contact one of us. And please do check us out and let us know if you have any questions. So, speaking of questions, are there any from the group right now? So again, please do try to put your questions in the Q&A section. Any questions? Any questions can be ESA related or, commenting related, really anything. Okay, here we go. We got one. In your experience, does it matter if you actually send a written letter or is it about the same to put a letter in the comment section? Oh, that's a really great question. I did not mention. You can tell I'm a millennial and I am reliant on my computer. Um, so that is a really great question. I'm going to defer to Jackie on that one in terms of do you think it matters with a one that's in person or
As
digital?
long as it's submitted by the deadline, it does not matter. I think um, the federal government has put a lot of effort into making it really easy for people to submit public comments online through regulations.gov. Um, and it is really easy to submit it online. So I encourage you, if you're able to do that because you're much more likely to get it in on time. But if you do not want to do that, then you could write a letter and mail it. And I believe that it's the date of postmarking is the date that they use to determine whether it meets the deadline or not.
Great, thank you. Yeah, great question. Sorry, I did not mention that. So they do accept both. But yeah, that's a great point. You have to get it in before the deadline. Okay. And we have another question. Let's see here. Da, da, da. Were the additional resources in the letter just for us or for the reader? That's a great question. Sorry, I did not make that more clear. That is mainly for you. So you can gather and have more materials for your argument in terms of the economic savings of protecting wildlife or, the ecological savings of protecting wildlife and particularly for the Endangered Species Act. So that's mainly for you so you can formulate your argument. But we do recommend, I have also, just to keep in mind, don't try not to plagiarize. So they do like to see some references sometimes if you are particularly taking exactly from something else, or it just is just generally helpful to show your resources that you're mentioning so they can reference in themselves. So that is for you to make your arguments, if you're having trouble finding something, I wanted to get you started basically. So great question.
I'll also add that I think if you are, as you're reviewing that information and kind of letting it guide you in what you might be writing using economic um, value as an example, you could include a statement where you are like quoting something from a particular report or including a general conclusion of a particular report, and then just include a short footnote citation to that. But then you can also follow that up with your own personal story, for example, about how maybe you and your family really like sea turtles. Sorry, I give you sea turtles as an example. Um, Sea turtles, and so you go on vacation to the beach where you can see sea turtle nesting sites, and you visit like the sea turtles at the aquarium or at the sea turtle center and learn about them. And so that is just one way you could provide your personal spin on it and say it's like, yeah, this is just more supporting evidence for that more generalized claim of official research that people have done about the economic value of wildlife, of listed species that are protected under this law. But then you could also say like, yeah, and I'm one of those people who helped contribute that economic value, and here's how.
Yeah, that's a great point. Awesome. Okay. Do you ever proofread letters? I mean, where I would be happy if you wanted to email me, like, just in case, like, before you send it over, I'd be happy to look over it. I don't wanna I won't sign Jackie on, but I'm happy to. I'll provide my email in the follow-up email. It's just jessica@wildvirginia.org, but I don't think in the past, have we? Have you guys for Mountain Valley Pipeline or anything?
I don't think so. Um, I think it's usually we're working on our own comment letters right until the last minute and
Yeah.
getting sign-ons on that, so there's a chance we would not get back to you in time.
Yeah, just to
Yeah.
reiterate, if I get 30 letters, I might not be able to get to all of them. So, yeah, but and we all are also I will be submitting my own comment for this, which I have not done yet, but I will be doing that. So, yeah, great question. Happy to. If you have a burning question, please do reach out to me though. Okay, let's see here. Let's see. Oh, I just missed one. Sounds like this will go pretty quickly to the Supreme Court, right? Will registered comments be accessible to the court? That's a Jackie question.
So, it is highly likely that this rulemaking will be challenged, but it does not go automatically to the Supreme Court. It is, since it's an agency rulemaking decision, it will have to be appealed to a lower court first. And then, depending on how that goes, will potentially end up going to the Supreme Court at the end. But you could, um, it could be a little while. Um, yes, the public comments will be available to the court. That is actually one of the reasons why you should participate in public commenting in any sort of capacity, whether it's this rulemaking or other issues that you care about, is because all of the public comments become part of the administrative record for any litigation that occurs. And so those are all resources that the attorneys can use to support their arguments. And I have personally reviewed comments to use in litigation, and it's the ones that are clear, concise, convincing, the ones that are relevant, the ones that just read well that I have ended up choosing as examples, pulling out quotes, pulling out examples that people have given about what they have done in this particular landscape where someone's trying to build some big project, or what they have done and how they enjoy this particular wildlife that always winter over at this wildlife refuge and things like that. So yes, to answer your question, it will likely be challenged, and we may see it at the Supreme Court, maybe not. Um, that depends just on how the litigation goes, and it will definitely be available to the court. If it does get there, it'll be available to any court um, that is involved in this litigation, because this all becomes part of the public administrative record.
Perfect. All right. It seems that doing harm to habitat can also increase the harm to other species, which then become endangered. Is that not a relevant point in this particular comment period, or should we stick to the current endangered and threatened species? So it's important to stick to the current endangered and threatened species. Absolutely. That should be the main point that you are trying to get across. But it is also something to mention that when we are assigning something as the critical habitat, that is of course going to have benefits to the ecosystem in general, and to the local community. It has all these sort of snowballing benefits, basically. So definitely something that you can choose to select in your argument, that you're just generally worried about the ecosystem in general. But for this, definitely the main topic you should be talking about is the endangered and threatened species, and upholding that law. And also just mentioning, like, this is one tool in our toolbox that we use to protect habitats and to protect endangered species. It's a major tool. It's not the only one, though. So it's just like Jackie sort of mentioned, it's a tool that we can pull out to protect the habitats and the ecosystems that we care about, and gives the general public more arguments and more backing to doing this type of work. So definitely trying to stick to the endangered and threatened species, but it is also good to mention that, it benefits many different areas as well. Okay. Here we go. Is connecting mental health of humans as impacted by extinction and loss with facts and research useful? I I'm Jackie, do you have I'm trying to like think of like for an effective comment. I don't know. What would you say to that?
I think it could be, and I think I would approach it from like studies have shown that time spent in nature is beneficial for human health, and flourishing. But then I would try to personalize it and talk about if there's a particular type of species, again, flora or fauna, wildlife, wild animals or plants that particularly impacts you in positive ways. I think that would make a more compelling comment. But yeah, that's totally something I think if you tie it in could be relevant.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Will there be other opportunities down the road to comment further about this certain issue? I would say if it's, well, this is again probably a jockey question, but if it's opened up again and different courts, I would say yes. Correct, right?
Not quite. So this is a proposed rule. So proposed rules, you have an opportunity to comment, and then they will publish a final rule, and there will also be an opportunity to, and after, so proposed rule, comment period, and then they'll close the comment period, they'll review all the comments, they'll revise the rule or not based on the comments, and they'll issue a final rule, and then there will be another public comment period to comment on the final rule. And then after that is potentially when there would be any legal challenges, but you would only get another opportunity to comment after that if the rulemaking was found to be invalid and the agency, everything gets thrown back to the agency and the agency has to start from scratch. So now's a really good time to comment if you can.
Awesome. All right. I think this is related. Are there any other rulings that we should be aware of, could write comments to? Absolutely. I mean, there's definitely going to be other potential comment periods for other laws, other things that the federal government is trying to do. And that's another benefit of becoming a Wild Virginia member, is that we're sort of always aware of when these comment periods in relation to the our conservation program, so habitat connectivity and water quality. Um, and we like to hold comment writing parties and also make the general public aware of these open comment periods. So yes, for other topics, I would say definitely too.
Yeah, sign up for the email list, and I'll give you an example of a rulemaking that we got notice of just yesterday that the Trump administration will be reopening and doing a new rulemaking for the drinking water rule on PFAS, on the maximum contaminant levels allowable for PFAS, which are type of toxic chemicals in drinking water. They are doing that rulemaking again. And so they'll be issuing a proposed rule this fall. So stay connected, keep following us so that you can find out when we're hosting that comment writing party.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't we're gonna be very busy. So I think a lot of these tips for general comment writings is just helpful across the board. It's good to know how to write these comments and have sort of these arguments in your back pocket that you can pull out. All right. Let's see. Thank you. Yes, this is good information. There is so much going on that's good to know and where we can stay focused on at the same time. Yeah, great. Thank you. And what about general references to documented biodiversity and species population declines nationally? General references and documented biodiversity and species population. So I put in one of the, I think this is maybe what you're talking about. I'm putting in one of the references in the letter template where you can go and you can actually look up what's going on with species declines for specific endangered and threatened species. So on the ESA website, you can also, there's oh my gosh, the IUCN Red List is another great resource to look up globally threatened populations and if their populations are in decline or recovering or stable. That's another resource we can provide you. I think that's maybe, am I getting that wrong? Hope I'm answering your question right. But yeah, we can definitely provide those resources for you.
And if you're thinking about referencing making general references to species decline in your comment, I think that can be relevant in the context of if this proposed rule um, that totally removes the definition of harm, removes this inclusion of habitat modification and degradation as part of the harm um, that equates to take, then you can use that to talk about how that um, further habitat destruction is going to lead to additional species decline, which we're already seeing.
Oh, yes. So, for example, bird and insect population declines. Yeah. So, okay. So the academic research coming in of like we've lost a third of bird density since the 1970s. Yeah, yeah. That I mean, I agree. I think that is great information to include as long as you're sort of relating it back to the main issue at hand and kind of having it to enhance your argument for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And particularly if you can find data on decline in any listed species,
Yeah.
that would be helpful too, especially if it's species that it's like, because, we know the California condor was one of the first species listed under the ESA and it has made a remarkable comeback. But what species have not recovered as well? What species, especially if they're newly listed, might be struggling and really need that continued protection that this definition of harm provides? So those would be great things to reference and great data to find if you can.
Absolutely. All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Right before we go, thank you for putting the regulations.gov in. I'm going to put in just the link to the letter template in the chat. So you have it, but again, it will also be in that email. There we go. Oop, that was toast and panelist. There we go. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay. That's all from me.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good luck in your writing.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Your comments definitely do make a huge difference. Again, as two people who've seen it from the inside, it definitely matters. We've used these comments in our arguments, and also I've seen it within U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So they do make a difference.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for your input.